Hello everyone, we're at the third and final video of how to organize things for your comparison contrast essay, and now I'm talking about the compare contrast portion, so that main analytical section of the body, and then how to conclude things. So as I've said here, and I already kind of mentioned when we were discussing the thesis, the ideal is for you to identify one point of similarity and one of difference, and the basic structure that I already kind of addressed and I'll come back to in the model in a moment is that you're basically going to take two paragraphs for similarity and two for difference, right? So if you look back at the way that I just kind of set this up visually, after the background, you're going to have similarity, similarity, difference, and difference, right? So I just want to take a little bit of time breaking this down and showing you what it looks like. The way that I describe it is just kind of a back and forth between the other, which would be either that individual or the community, and yourself, right? So other me is kind of the back and forth structure that I find to be the most effective for this sort of analysis. So this is the breakdown of the model essay, and again, I don't have time to read through all of it with you, but I think that just kind of visualizing it will give you a sense of how to kind of map out your own essay. So I really recommend doing this sort of outline just to be sure that the logic is all connected and that one point leads to the next. So we already looked at the background, right? What I include there is, of course, Smith's biography, and then a little bit of context on the main, topic that I'm looking at, which has to do with language. For the similarity, the first section, I'm focused on Smith, and I talk about her celebration of Black and immigrant dialect, right? So this is something that is a point that connects us, the interest and investment in using vernacular or using dialect to express the authentic way that people from minority communities speak with each other. And then the second point here is focused less on just observing her in that regard and talking about my current interest and observations in this area. So the way I summarize it here is recognition of current relevance of minority vernacular. So let me just go and open those sections. I'm not going to read all of them, but I just want you to see how I'm kind of organizing things within the topic sentence. So that first section I just mentioned, right, it says, Smith celebrates most prominently Black and immigrant dialect and vernacular. So just setting up this idea of how it's a clear topic in her work and her worldview, right? And I integrate research, the article that we looked at, and talk about this notion of her realizing kind of the beauty and the power of Southern vernacular, and then I go into research from an author named Watts who has a lot of analysis of non-standard language that's used in Smith. So it's just a little bit more of an objective contextualization for that. And again, other research I did just ties into the broader point here. The statement I have here, there is a profound statement that literature like Smith's can make in regard to which types of language ought to be appreciated and respected by a culture. And then I talk about a source that's discussing this idea of kind of high class versus low class in literature, and how we have this idea to kind of not celebrate stories like Smith's that deal with a lot of dialect. And so my point here is that she's really invested in changing that tradition of looking at novels as this high art form that can't deal with broken language, basically. So that's what all this first section is about. And it's all based on her, right? Now I'm transitioning into the second similarity section, which is about my personal investment in the same topic. So I say, just as Smith appreciates the value of working class people of color despite their historical absence as lead figures in storytelling, I find that the use of contemporary vernacular and high art forms to be validated by current transitions. So, what I'm talking about here is how in current society we have a lot of examples of how things have changed. And I mean, I could even say this within the past, few years, and that we're getting a lot more recognition in rap music and hip hop music, which used to be associated with just kind of low class violence and, maybe promiscuity. And now it's getting into something that's viewed as a higher level. So I'm using the source we talked about last week that's dealing with African American vernacular English, and it's talking about how it needs to have a little more respect. And then it goes into a look at a particular recent example of Kendrick Lamar winning the Pulitzer Prize, and just talking about how that really revealed this sort of transition that I think started with, people having a vision like Zadie Smith did, and how it's expanded. So the whole point here is having a conversation with the point of view that I've established here and leading into my own cultural observation. And then the same thing happens for difference, right? Except things are a little bit more complicated because we're not looking at a connection, we're looking at what distinguishes, her and me. So when I look at the difference for the first part, I'm focused on Smith and I'm talking about her writing of multiple cultural identities. So as we talked about in class before, she's not only writing herself, she's writing about Jamaicans, which is a part of her identity, and British, but she's also writing about Indians, and she's also writing about Irish people, and she's also writing about Pakistani people. And so there's a lot of variety. And I talk about how her being mixed is a part of why she explains that she feels really comfortable and confident shifting between different languages and dialects. And even though I understand that and I kind of break it down, I say in my response with my personal view on this that I feel like writers should be more focused on investigating their own identities. So what I'm trying to say here is that she shouldn't be, even though I understand that since she is multicultural herself as a human being, there's a desire or there's this belief that you kind of understand different cultures, but I'm just saying I don't totally agree with that. And as someone who's multicultural myself, I still don't feel like it's necessarily my responsibility to start running the risk of cultural appropriation just because I'm multicultural myself. There's so many cultures that I don't feel as confident in. And so I think she kind of is going a little bit overboard with that. And so that's where I kind of complicate things despite my kind of establishing of respect for her. So that's the breakdown of the bodies. Very briefly, the conclusion, as you guys know, is just going to be the bigger picture, right? So I said two things to think about. What is the significance of your connection and disconnection? And then based on your investigation, do you have a new understanding of him, her, or them? So I'm not going to show you the entire conclusion here, but you can take a look at it, right? I kind of go back to where I started. I say, so what is to come of Obama's I Think I Screwed Up and Smith's multicultural communities? What should I, as a mixed race writer, reach toward? Should I limit myself to the creation of characters with my own experience, or rest assured in the belief that my own multifaceted background allows me to transition into identities to speak in tongues in a way that others cannot? This is from the Smith article, which you guys will notice when you read it. So I'm just establishing some questions, right, for final self-analysis, and it just ends with a bigger point of view, which has to do with the time periods from us, right? I'm saying that I think that Smith was progressive for her time, but she was writing a couple of decades ago, and we're in a really politically correct culture right now. So it wouldn't be as easy for me writing a novel right now to have as much diversity of dialects as she did back then, right? And so, as I said here, I cannot in 2018 capture the identities of characters so far from my own identity without fear of critique, but I have great respect for Smith's audacity. So this is what I want, is just a final note of, based on these similarities and differences, what is it that you can understand, right? What has your investigation of these overlaps and disconnections led you to understand in a broader sense about both this topic and your own identity? So once you've gone through the conclusion, right, and again, that part is not going to be based on research, it's just going to be kind of your own thoughts on the topic. Of course, you'll have a works cited and all that, and just make sure to go back and look at the structural expectations that you're doing your intro with a thesis, that your body has your background and your clear points of similarity and difference, and that you have circled into this more complex, bigger picture. So we will touch upon more of this as we continue with class tomorrow. Thank you very much.